All right, so we are a few minutes late, so we might actually get started while people are coming in and settling down in the room. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to this session on multi-account with Centrica Hive. So we have guest speaker from Centrica Hive today. It is going to be primarily customer-driven session. So my name is Nivaj Kumar. I'm a solutions architect here at AWS. So I just wanted to quickly introduce this session, and before I hand over to Jay and Mark from Hive, I wanted to give a very quick context around this session and why we thought this is really an important topic to discuss with the customer community like yourselves. So from AWS perspective, we're seeing multi-account is kind of an emerging theme and is becoming really important topic for our customers, especially as you grow your footprint, as you grow your workloads on AWS. It becomes really crucial to kind of understand how can you isolate these workloads, from a security perspective, from billing, from management perspective. Of course, the key focus today will be very much on security, and there are other aspects that we can talk about as well later on. As you adopt multi-account structure and multi-account strategy for your AWS workloads, there are a lot of considerations that you need to think about. Things around authentication, single sign-on, how do you build hybrid architectures with the on-premises and a number of different accounts on AWS, the manageability of these accounts with tools like organizations. So for this reason, we invited Centrica Hive to come here today and really share their own journey. They've been users of AWS for quite a long time, and share what their journey has been, how they have matured their account structures over the years, and what are the tools they have built themselves, as well as using AWS tools to overcome some of the challenges as they faced as part of this journey. And also what it looks like in terms of the forward-looking view from their perspective. So I guess at this point, I would like to hand over to Jay to carry on from here.
Yeah, feel free to applaud. Yeah. This is Hive at the front, so it's either heckling or clapping. I'm not sure which yet. Morning, everyone. Just about morning still, isn't it? I'm Jay Harrison. I'm the SRE technical lead for Centrica Hive. I've been there about 4 years, and this is some of the things that we've done with our multi-account strategy and security over the last period of time. The thing to remember here is we've been using AWS for quite a while. Personally, about a decade. In Hive, about 8 years now, 7 years. We've built this strategy over a period of time. It's what works for us. Obviously, your mileage may vary, but hopefully you'll learn something from it. So, a brief history of Hive, which you can feel free to ignore. This is the product bit. British Gas launched a product called Remote Heating Control in 2011. In partnership with a company called AlertMe. It was ahead of its time, one of the first IoT remote heating devices. But it had limited demand for a number of reasons. There was no significant design improvement over older non-smart thermostats. Everyone's got, even if you don't have a smart thermostat, everyone's got the white plastic control panel on their wall somewhere in their home, or has had at some point. You control your heating with a bad interface, with terrible feedback, with a poor user journey. This didn't massively improve on it, but it was necessary. Despite that, moderately successful. 100,000 customers on the platform by the time we closed it down. So, in 2012 then, British Gas started up what was then British Gas Connected Homes. As a lean startup, 12 people in a borrowed basement in the middle of London, building on those lessons learned from that first product. And the result of that was, in 2013, their first IoT product released. Hive Active Heating V1, again with the white plastic, but having said that, significantly improved user journey. 2015, however, brought out our V2 thermostat, which is a familiar one. You've probably seen the adverts. This was designed in conjunction with Yves Behar, the noted industrial designer. Significant improvement over any other British Gas thermostat that was available before that. Improved UI, better user journey, holiday modes, smart features built into the thermostat as opposed to just a function of the mobile app or the website that was used to control it. So building on that success, we've now released in the last couple of years a suite of IoT devices, bulbs, plugs, etc. And our first camera came out in 2016. We also released a diagnostic product, Boiler IQ, in conjunction with British Gas that year. Further diagnostic products and third-party services. So we were a launch partner with the Amazon Echo in 2017. We've now got integrations with If This Then That, Google Home, Philips Hue, a number of others are upcoming. And then most recently, of course, 2018, we launched our second camera, which again, better features. This is an iterative process. You release a product to the market, you figure out how it works, you figure out what people like, and then you improve upon it. So, SRE at Centrica Hive, this is my team. I'm going to run through this quickly as well because this just gives you a background to the type of organization we're working in. We run, much like your traditional technical operations team or DevOps type role, we run the system services and tools used by our product development teams to build and release these IoT products, amongst others, to our customers. And we're roughly split into three. We've got service engineers, product engineers, and security engineers. The guys building and maintaining the tools themselves, the guys working with the product teams to use those services that we build, and they're embedded in the product teams, so they're part of their product development lifecycle. And then security engineers, who are a more recent addition, but they're writing tools then to secure the infrastructure as we grow. And then, of course, the users and services built with those services. And we have a simple mantra. We've been doing this for a number of years now, and it basically comes down to those four things. Prefer services to software, prefer software to people, prefer people to bureaucracy, and prefer chat ops for everything, right? Put everything where everyone can see it. And this has served us really well. And one of the most fundamental shifts we've had in recent years was a willingness to move away from that myth of cloud agnosticism. We are a 100% AWS shop now. Except for some internal IS systems, all of our infrastructure, production, development, research, data analytics, it's all AWS. And not only that, but we're actively making use of AWS managed services wherever we can. So that includes not just RDS and those kind of obvious migrations you can do off of running services on EC2, but also AWS IoT services, Dynamo, Elasticsearch service, a whole bunch. We'll go into some more detail. And there we are. That's the reasons we use AWS. It fits with our mindset. It's really easy to source engineering and development talent that work and have worked extensively with AWS. It's reliable, obviously subject to an engineering effort on our part to make sure that reliability is built into our applications as well. And it's adaptable. Again, as Werner mentioned in his keynote, a whole slew of managed services that you can take advantage of if you have the willingness to do so. So how have we grown together? As I said, we've been using AWS from the get-go, from 2011 onwards. How have we grown with AWS? So this is how we grew as a business. 2011, 2012, we were, like I say, a lean enterprise, very small, very agile, looking to disrupt the market, all those kind of corporate appreciative buzzwords that you use to get money out of the blue chip that owns you. We grew into a larger business, product and customer base growth, scaling, expansion, new products, improved products, as we saw with the V2 thermostat. 2016 then saw a significant change. We acquired our main platform and hardware partner, AlertMe, as I mentioned earlier. We merged the teams and functions. We made best use of the people that we acquired as part of that merger. and integrated the functions, both development, engineering, sales, marketing, business, across the board. And then again, more recently, the last couple of years, 2017, 2018, international growth. We launched in Ireland. We've launched in the US now. We've launched in Canada. Again, one of the benefits of being owned by a multinational blue chip is wherever they have a sales channel, we have a sales channel. How have we grown in terms of AWS accounts? So taking those 4 same time periods, very small back in the day, we started off with your typical 2, a dev and a prod account. Everything non-prod went into dev, everything prod was bundled into one. 2014, we grow to be a larger business. We start to adopt the proper multi-account strategy. We start providing individual accounts for individual teams for them to do closeted research or blast radius reduced research in those accounts. 2016 then doubled our number of accounts. Partner acquisition, we merged all of their accounts, again along with their teams and functions, into our infrastructure and into our management principles. And of course the explosion, and you may notice a correlation here with the release of AWS organizations in 2016, an explosion of accounts, more than trebled. In fact, more than quadrupled now nearly from 2016, just in the last 2 years. So, how are we now? We have at least one AWS account per product and or environment, quite often both. 110 accounts, and still growing. Because AWS organizations allowed automation of that process, producing an account is almost as easy as producing an IAM role now. You can automate this stuff. Is that big? No, maybe. We're less than 1,000 people in the company, so that's one account per about 10 people at the moment. That's quite an impressive ratio. But it's not small either. There may be people in the audience here who have more than that number of accounts. Hopefully you'll take something away from this talk to be able to manage them. We have a fairly large data volume going in there. Operational telemetry at 100,000 points a second, 230,000 log files per day from just CloudTrail alone. That's not application logs or system logs, no, VPC flow logs, ELB logs, nothing like that. That's just CloudTrail. That's just actions against the AWS platform. And then in terms of logs, over 7 billion searchable documents in 12 Amazon Elasticsearch logging clusters. Again, that's mostly application logs, but that's about a month's worth of data now. The other change we made recently is enterprise support. A couple of years ago, we bit the bullet, got enterprise support, and it's a godsend. If you're managing this kind of size of infrastructure, enterprise support will change the way you interact with AWS. Not just because of the improvement in lead time and feedback time on support tickets, but for that matter, the access we get to product teams. We have direct contact with a number of the product teams that we use in large amounts at the moment. We get priority feature requests. We get to feedback the way we're using those services to AWS and see the results of that feedback coming back to us in fairly short order. So, that's how we've grown with AWS as a whole. Why multi-account? So it offers a number of benefits, and if you're using multi-account already, these may well have been the benefits that AWS, as their multi-account being their sort of best practice solution for this kind of infrastructure size. So those are the sort of 5 main ones that we take away. Separation of responsibility. Giving an individual product team an individual account for an individual environment means we know who is in that account and what they're doing. We can tell when their dev account balloons out of a cost budget. We can tell by the number of customers on a platform against the production costs what our cost per user is, at least in infrastructure terms. Again, cost attribution by product or function. The way we've got our accounts set up, and again, I'll go into some detail about that in a minute, we can attribute our costs both to product and environment. So not only can we attribute a bunch of costs to a particular product, but we can attribute all our dev costs to just our dev environments. We can attribute our research costs to just our research environments. We can attribute our data analytics costs to just our data analytics environment. You can slice that data in a number of ways with a sensible, consistent multi-account approach. Of course, there's the much-touted reduced blast radius for changes. This is less important for EC2 than you might expect, because obviously in EC2 terms, you've got VPCs as your separation mechanism. However, this becomes even more important when you're using managed services. So Lambda, API Gateway, Dynamo, those things aren't separated and cannot be, or at least certainly by security groups and that kind of thing, but they are not separated by any kind of network infrastructure in the managed service section of your AWS account. So if you want to separate out your dev and production Dynamo tables, you have to put them in separate accounts. We have a clear security boundary. Again, down to the network in EC2, that's not as important because you've got that control with VPC, the VPC mechanism. But again, for API gateways, for your serverless, for your IoT service implementations, a security boundary is there at the edges of the account. Obviously, you don't want to just do the edges, defense in depth and all that, but it gives you a clear boundary and clear attribution of that boundary as well. If you've assigned an account to a product team, that product team then has responsibility for the security account based on the best practice and processes involved in the available in the company. And of course, easier account limit management. If you're extensively using an AWS account, you're going to hit limits at some point. Resource limits, API call limits, I/O limits, simple EC2 instance type availability limits in a particular region. I don't know if any of you have hit those. We have. If you start using some of the less common instance types, I2s, R3s, that kind of thing, there's only a certain amount in EU West or in EU Central. You may well even hit those limits. So again, because those limits are account specific, generally speaking, that gives you better management of those limits as well. The early challenges we had, and a lot of these were down to the way we grew as a company, were, well, among them were we had a manual process for IAM user management. It was a mess. We've improved it, and again, I'll tell you how. But it was a mess for a long time. Leavers who weren't processed, people who had access to at the wrong privilege levels, people who had access to the wrong services, people who had access in accounts they weren't even part of the product team for anymore. A whole slew of stuff. We had no consistency in account naming, in IAM user naming, in account usage or in resource tagging. This was a wild west. It was very disorganized. Again, as part of this journey, we've applied some consistency to that as well. Under consolidated billing, although obviously it makes it easier for your finance department to pay that big giant AWS bill at the end of the month, actual cost attribution in those, if you're going to go through that giant 1,000-line CSV every month, is tough. Again, applying some of this consistency allowed far better cost attribution, complex cost attribution. Again, Wild West. We had very little oversight. Because of the rapid growth of the company, development teams were given an account and left to get on with it. Again, total lack of consistency because of that. And then, again, due to growth, we needed third-party contributors. We have development teams that are based in remote regions. We partner with our previous hardware and platform partner. Again, an awful lot of people that weren't in the core company that were accessing our services, our accounts. The specific issues we found with AWS multi-account itself include VPC peering. Again, due to the fact there was no consistency in the management of these accounts in the first place, if we decided that two products needed to connect via VPC peering at some point in their future, and they had an IP range clash, not a chance. There is no way to VPC peer, or at least there wasn't, to VPC peer between VPCs if their IP ranges clash. Without some sort of consistency applied to that IP range assignment in the first place, you cannot connect them. It's as simple as that. You have to relaunch one of those products at least in an entirely new range, which means relaunching it from scratch for the most part. Lots of places to manage stuff. Keeping track was a chore. Multi-region and multi-account, there's a lot of places there. What are we up to now? 12, 15 regions, something like that? 80 odd accounts. That's a lot of places to keep track of things when things are region specific. Again, as I mentioned on the previous slide, IAM management, AWS Identity and Access Management, it was a nightmare. Tons of unmanaged users, tons of users that were strewn around the place in every account you could find, simply because they might need access at some point. All with admin access, of course, because that makes it easy for everyone, doesn't it? Except me. Logging everything. That sheer volume of data coming in, I mentioned some of those numbers earlier. Where do you store that stuff? How do you parse it in any kind of meaningful way to get interesting data out of it? It's a tough ask. And then again, like I said, many accounts are no consistency, just sheerly due to growth speed. So, how do we fix some of this? This is what you want to take notes on. We started out with a 4-pronged approach. And this did take a while. Bear in mind, quite a lot of the AWS account management actions are manual still. There are things you cannot automate here. There are things you have to log into every single root account on every AWS account you own and change it manually. This took a while. But we now have consistent account naming. And again, this goes back to our sort of tagging standard of product environment, role, and geographic location. We named our accounts in the same way that we were naming our resources. A product or function, an environment that product was using, and a geographic location if it was relevant. Consistent notifications, standardized email addresses, both for the root account and for the additional notification email addresses that are available. Again, another manual entry in the account information. Consolidated notifications in visible places, instance events, monitoring, deployments, everything in Slack. Again, that goes back to our ChatOps mantra, right? Put everything where everyone can see it. They don't have to watch it, they don't have to subscribe to the channel, but it's there. And then consistent security, which has been our most recent effort. Not just these 3 things, but a number of security implementations and what's the word I'm looking for? Spearheads. That'll do, good as any. Things that we needed to improve in order to impose consistency on these accounts. Root user 2-factor authentication. CloudTrail everywhere so we can see what people are doing. Not in a creepy way, but just to make sure. And then guard duty everywhere to make sure that we can see what's coming in from outside and what's consistent security-wise internal to the account. So this is just an example. Names have been changed to protect the innocent, but this is an example of how you and we have arranged our accounts. So we've got basically 4 broad types. A master payer account that's completely empty, it's restricted access, and it's used for automation of everything else. We have sensitive and restricted accounts, security administration accounts, centralized logging, centralized backups, operational services that should be available to everyone in the company. Product and function accounts, as I mentioned, at least 1 production and 1 non-production account per product or function. And that function might be entirely internal. It might not be customer-facing at all, but we make sure they've got at least 1 of each. And then isolated product or function accounts, which are standalone. They're mostly throwaway accounts. We spin them up, again, because the automation makes it easy. We give them to a product team, they develop something, and then they move it into their dev account. Maybe they want the separation to start with. Maybe it's a new service we're trialing and we don't want to impact anything else at the moment. Maybe it's a proof of concept that we want to be able to demonstrate before we integrate it into the wider infrastructure. Again, standalone accounts. And this is an example, again, not real names, but this is an example of how we name our accounts. So you can see there, master billing account at the top, the secure accounts, centralized logging, security, internal IT, the standalone accounts, test products and research, the products and function accounts then on the right-hand side. Again, at least 1 dev and prod account per product or function with regional attributions if they're appropriate. As I mentioned, AWS organizations allowed it enabled a lot of this automation to happen. We already had consolidated billing, but consolidated account management just wasn't there before organizations. We had some automation around it, but it was very ad hoc. Account creation rather, automation of that through organizations is far, far easier. Use of organizational units within organizations for programmatic assignment of accounts. We can assign a group of accounts to a product or a cost center or an individual even, depending on the requirement. And then, of course, use of service control policies to centrally manage those high-level permissions. So, I think these slides are going to be available afterwards, but this is, again, redacted to a certain extent, but this is a rough methodology for automating that account creation. You create the account through organizations, you make sure it's successful, you assume a role in the new account, and then they use those assumed credentials to create, in this case, our operational roles stack, our consistent security stance. We apply default IAM roles and things to users coming in. And then, obviously, a password policy and a friendly name for use by the teams themselves. So these are the remaining manual tasks then. Like I said, all of this can't be automated yet. They're working on it, bless them, but not yet. So there are still some things you need to manually do on account creation. Significantly smaller list than it used to be. Tax settings and support package. If you are using anything other than the basic support, your concierge should do this for you. We have our concierge set up the VAT settings and enable enterprise support on all our accounts when we create them. We enable root account security, so we set strong passwords, multi-factor authentication. We store those centrally in a secure database, encrypted, of course. And that means that both the root account credentials are available to the business should they need them, but we have that added layer of protection in the multi-factor authentication. Again, alternative contacts. We use our root accounts for mostly billing data, billing information from the accounts. So if you want your teams to be notified when something happens in their specific accounts, you need to set the alternative contacts in the account settings. We set an operational and a security alternative contact in each of those accounts that we create, and in fact in all the existing legacy accounts for team notifications, so they get duplicated on everything but the billing information. Again, a manual task. And then of course your last bit, which is probably the most important bit in terms of the internal company use of the accounts, is document this stuff and communicate it to the teams who've requested it. So these are some of our standardization tools. Now you can, the top one and the bottom one are internal proprietary ones, so unfortunately I can't give you a GitHub link. Well, I could, but you wouldn't be able to view it anyway, so that's no good to you. But anyway, those are the four main security tools we use. Billomatic, which is a lot like Netflix ICE. Yeah, anyone using Netflix ICE? It's a consolidated billing data analysis tool. You pull in your giant billing CSV every day, and it slices and dices the data for you, gives you some feedback on what's being spent and where. Billomatic's a lot like that. Security Monkey, again, another Netflix tool. This is a fantastic one for consolidated account management because although it's focused on highlighting security problems with your accounts, it also happens to serve as quite a nice resource database because every 20 minutes, it scans our entire account estate and puts all those resources, both past and present, into a database, which means all that stuff is queryable in a central location. We've hooked that up to Slack, so we can get that information in real time as well. Elastatus, which again is a similar tool. It draws all those resources into a single pane of glass view of every account. It makes it read-only, so you can't action anything in there, but for business view of your resources, it's an incredibly useful tool. If you want more information about that, the lead author's sat in the front row. And the last one, of course, is centralized logging service. We make full use of the Amazon Elasticsearch service to aggregate all our application and operational logging into one account. Kibana on the front of it, a sensible user policy to allow people access to it, and it gives everyone access to whichever application logs they need. So I'm going to stop talking now and hand you over to my colleague, Mark Davison, who is with Ronan IT Consulting. He's our current SRE security consultant. Mark.
Thank you, Jay. In fact, I'm going to stick this down here because I drop it. So, as Jay says, I'm from Ronan IT Consulting. I was brought in about a year ago. The boss is down there, so he'll correct me. And really, we were looking at, from the position that basically Centrica Hive had got to, what we needed to do and help them with next. So here's some current progress. We're running short on time, partly because of the overrun from earlier, and also, Jay, you're cutting me short, man. So I'm going to skip this, but the organizations Jay's really covered, and we're going to go into this in a bit more detail. So configuration management. So we're using AWS CloudFormation. That was already in place before I turned up. And one of the things that we've done with that one is actually an idea that we also use with our Puppet stuff. We have a centralized route, so we have a Puppet route and a CloudFormation route, where we provide some best practice guidance for operational and security items. And it gives you a starter for 10. It gets projects going quickly. So it helps with those POCs and things as well. And it gives us a bit of reassurance that when the developers are spinning up something new, that they're not just leaving it open to the world or doing something silly. So we've got the SAM is essentially that little shortcut in CloudFormation that gets you Lambdas quicker, and it does all your API gateway stuff for you. So we use SAM and we use serverless. And serverless, that's the serverless framework. We use the serverless framework very specifically around just standing up some Lambdas. When we're doing something quite pure. When we want to do something complicated, we kick in with SAM and we can spin up databases and EC2 instances and everything else. We're using the code pipeline and the code build to assure us again and prove all these things through. And then we've got stack sets in place. And stack sets we really use from the organizational point of view, putting in roles and groups and assuring that we've got everything consistent across all the accounts. So CHAM, this is a tool you cannot currently get your hands on. We are developing this at the moment. It's currently in beta, but it's been so useful for us that we wanted to share it at this point. We hope we're going to be able to open source this later in the year. It's a self-service tool to access all the AWS accounts. So it gives you your command line and your console access on time-limited credentials, and we centralize that database of users. So we're using Cognito and RDS, and this is kind of the slightly simplified diagram of how it all works. But we're federating off of Centrica's AD, essentially. We pull that into Cognito, and that gives us our authentication piece. Then we do this it's kind of manual at the moment, but what we do is we give the managers of the product teams, or the Scrum Masters, the access and the control over a set of accounts, and then they can say who's allowed into those accounts and what level of permissions they're allowed. So that's then handled and placed into the RDS database, which gives us our authorization. And then all of this is audited. So that's our AAAs. So we've got two clients. There's a Slack client and a command line client that are functionally identical. They make a call into API gateway. That hits the Lambda. The Lambda does that lookup to authentication, the lookup for the authorization. It then has to grab a long-lived credential set, and it fires off to STS to get some short-term keys, creates an assumed role in a different account, sends you your key back to whichever client you've used. And the added bit of fun in there is that with the command line client, it can update your AWS credentials file. So that's just done for you. And that makes it really easy. And then, should someone leave the company, we've got one place we need to go to, and we can just cut their access there and then. So the other thing is guard duty. Guard duty has been a real boon. We were going to start writing a system to do this, and then Amazon launched guard duty. Sorry, AWS launched guard duty. It was great. Saved us so much time and money. So it gives near real-time network and log analysis. It's got really useful built-in rule set. There's a new feature out today to do some auto-archiving. Its killer feature for us really was that it could monitor the AWS API calls. So it's watching the CloudTrail logs, and it's telling us when something odd is happening. anything unusual. So users logging into an account they've never logged into before, in a region they've never used, we get to hear about that. And we're using so we basically, we'll put it this way, we've done a small amount of work. If you compare that to the CHAM kind of slide and the complexity of that diagram against this one, we've got a nice black box, which does a load of stuff, and that fires out a CloudWatch event. And then we've written a Lambda. So AWS have provided one already, but we've got one that's slightly more complex and does a few other things. So we do two things essentially with this Lambda. We fire to a central alerts channel that all the security teams can look at and are looking at. And then we also do a lookup in parameter store, and we send the notification via whichever method that the product team require for their account to them as well. So we've got two places it's going. So it's going to the people who can see the bigger picture and the people who can truly do something about it. Wavefront is our telemetry telemetry system. Essentially, everything at Centrica Hive is, it emits metrics, it emits telemetry. If it doesn't emit telemetry, we consider it that it doesn't exist. I'm kind of skip this because we're running short on time. That's a quick example of the sort of thing that you get from Wavefront. And then Security Monkey. So Jay's kind of mentioned what it does. It's been really useful in terms of getting that policy in place. We can write our own custom rules as well. So we're watching everything all the time for any changes in the AWS infrastructure. So when someone makes a change, we know about it. And we can track those changes back because we have a history in Security Monkey. We've got a record for justifications. So if something doesn't meet the normal policies, but there is a good reason behind it, teams can come in and put their justification in and explain to the centralized security teams what it is that they're doing and why, to mitigate any risks that might come off that. And then these centralized security teams can then engage as well with the product teams. Again, a bit more complicated. We've done a few little things to add to Security Monkey, and it's really around the alerting. So we're getting alerts fired out via Lambdas again off SNS queues. One of the things we do is, so Security Monkey, just like CHAM does, we used short-lived credentials and assumed roles in different accounts. So Security Monkey goes in at the time it goes in and uses new credentials to do that. It does a quick scan. It's always read-only, and then it returns, and all that gets fired back off to our central alerting systems, as well as us looking in the dashboards. So that's been really handy to understand, and we've paired that with guard duty. So when we're triaging guard duty alerts, we're often looking across at Security Monkey. So we're not done yet. There's loads more to do. There's probably years of work to go. We've made those enhancements. We need to go a bit further. So that thing we've done with guard duty, where we're alerting to different channels, we need to perform the same function with Security Monkey. We're looking at Amazon Kinesis and Amazon Kinesis Analytics to do the streaming of the log data, push all that through, and investigate and interrogate those logs. So we're going to do some basic stuff with some Lambdas, like we want to identify people are running run command, for example, or we want to see where an SSH ports are in use. And then we want to put in things like SageMaker, that you might have heard in the keynote, so SageMaker and the AI kind of technologies, to start to analyze those log flows and try and pick up on anomalies, particularly around the applications that Centrica Hive run, rather than the things that guard duty is covering for us. In future, we'll also reach the point where we can auto-remediate. So if the business said, well, we want VPC flow logs everywhere, we can drop a Lambda in that ensures that carries on. At the moment, we do that with CloudTrail. We've got AWS organizations. We tick a box, and that just works. So it's really a case of extending and pushing those things forward. Another thing we're doing is our systems manager run command. And we're really dropping that in, and we're starting to move away from SSH as a mechanism of connecting to instances. We don't want people running that. The benefit of run command is that we can say, if you're logging in and doing something, we now can see what you're doing where we couldn't with SSH, and we can approach you as a product team and talk about why it is that you need to log into a box, and maybe there are other solutions we could offer. And it's really a piece of engagement with teams. Stumbling blocks. It's not been completely plain sailing. Nothing's perfect, but it's always improving. So that's one of the really nice things with AWS is everything keeps getting better. So stack sets, we've got us going really quickly, but we hit limitations straight away really on accounts. So you can only do 50 at a time, stack set deployments. So we had 100+ accounts. We had to run it 3 times. We had a few little issues with redeploying or updating a stack. So that's one of the reasons we're also using code pipelines. So we don't push everything through and some of the really heavyweight stuff that might be a bit complex unless we have to. And then we can use code pipeline instead to do some of that more intricate work. The service control policies, they're not really fine-grained enough for our use case. They're not designed to be. So that's not really an AWS failing. They're really focused on API calls and limiting per product and API across accounts or between accounts. We need things that do as, I've got this set of roles and I need them to be locked down, but to allow you to change all the other roles. That's where we're bringing in the automated remediation to solve that problem for us. Guard duty, this is a quibble. Guard duty has been fantastic. There's no overall security dashboard for guard duty. We can't see all the regions in one place. We can see each region, so I've got to look in 14 places now to see all of the guard duty consoles. I'd like to have one, but we're alerting out to Slack anyway, so I can see it there. So it's not the end of the world. And then we work really closely with AWS. So we have AWS staff on site with us at least weekly. We do a lot of detailed feedback. We've met with some of the product teams. We met the guard duty team lead a few weeks ago, which is a real privilege for us. The access that we get because we have enterprise support, it opens doors to conversations and ways of thinking that we may not have otherwise had. The other thing is the support team are fantastic. I think we log tickets pretty much on a daily basis, and we always get detailed feedback. We're never patronized, which would be easy sometimes. We do sometimes ask daft questions. But the support teams have been fantastic. We always get quick responses, so that just helps us to get things moving and keep everything flowing, particularly when you're in a mind space and you're working on a problem. Equally, we're not perfect either. So we have far too many logs. That's why we're looking at the Kinesis streaming and the analytics and using some AI tools and technology. Also buy-in. I think this is a problem probably for every company, unless you're very small and you can just tell them what to do. But everywhere I've worked and all the companies I get to visit and see, buy-in is often a key part of it. And that's really about saying, well, we don't want you doing these things in our accounts, and we have to persuade them and engage and show the benefit and the value add that we provide. So these are our contact details. Also, I'll jump back to this slide, but please complete the session survey in the Summit mobile app. That's the big beg. But from us, we're up here. We're going to hang around for a bit today as well, because I'm not sure if we've got time for Q&A. But yeah, come and have a chat, and thank you very much for listening.